MKD8 here, and I thought I would go ahead and make this video about how Kid Icarus Uprising's combat system works. I'm doing so after having asked Mushironi about what he thinks about risk assessment moves, and he did make some fine points in his response, such as how overemphasis on risk assessment can all too easily breed elitism. The funny thing is that I was asking what he brought up to have me do as much and me think about the spin shot technique in Kid Icarus Uprising. But naturally, I will get to that. Now, as a disclaimer, if Kid Icarus Uprising were to be remade, as people are guessing by Bandai Namco's recent activity would happen, I recommend you, the viewer, to keep in mind that what I talk about here applies to the 3DS version. The controls will be guaranteed to be fixed in a Switch version, hopefully with optional gyro aiming, and preferably retaining enough camera rotating momentum with an adjustment option for the spin shot technique to be usable. Oh, and let me display about my controls quickly, particularly the reticle camera. Yeah, I have this thing set to stop quickly at a high amount. Horizontal vertical speed. yeah, you see how I handle the camera thing. Anyway, balance changes are quite possible, but hopefully we'll focus on stamping out misfires, such as both the Celestial Fireworks Power's absurd panic button ability without any sort of acceptable counterbalance, as well as weapon modifiers abuses in general. I will naturally focus on details that by all rights work as is in general, primarily in the baseline combat system. The whole point of this video is basically a sort of dojo for handling the combat system in Kid Icarus Uprising. Of course, I do have my own commentary to provide because this is a personal analysis when all is said and done, in the interest of getting game design to improve in general. And besides which, I do recommend players to not think in absolutes, instead opting to take a look at the logic behind my points and even innovate on what they figure does and doesn't work. I do have a lot of experience backing up what I'll mention, but I could always have my blind spots regardless. Again, I am having to have face that my non-complaint commentary will still apply in any non-3DS version of Kid Icarus Uprising. But I do want to make it clear that Kid Icarus Uprising does have a combat system with workable risk assessment leading to better option variety. At the very least when it's not busy being teased with weapon modifier abuses, such as from Evasion Plus, Shot Range Plus, and the Speed Plus modifiers. That's honestly my point, that learning fundamentals provides a healthier sense of consistency, one that does not rely on tools that involve key factors that can very well get called out in the first place. Shot Range Plus getting nerfed? Skyscraper Club can't make use of it in the first place, and let me demonstrate that quick. Yeah, the shots are just too slow, at least the dash shots. Evasion Plus going bye-bye? Well, no worries. I can still didn't learn how to dodge individual attacks, which makes grid reading equal parts even more satisfying, and feeling like it actually accomplishes some usefulness. B plus modifiers being stopped from running around with their easy kiting or the various other ways for mobility to be useful? In the first place, I plan my movement routes. So yeah, 2-hit KOing, let alone 1-hit KOing, being so much more of a luxury than subjecting it to counterplay with no more free passive attack power boost. Oh, look at that, I still have my maneuvers. See where I'm going with this? You can make use of my points to manage self-improvement a lot better than you ever could with those drugs calling themselves weapon modifiers. The road to self-improvement wouldn't be easy, but I would only show its worth. Now, let's begin with how the different attacks work. First up is charge shots, and I will simply call them shots as I have for the sake of simplicity. I'll cover the neutral attacks in their own point, because the dash shots do involve the bulk of each weapon type's character, even if some weapons' neutral shots do similarly involve as much. Hello, Guardian Orbitars. Now, first up is the forward shot. With punishing force, the forward shot is pretty simple. You bounce in the direction you're facing and fire in that direction, with the bouncing improving net power if you're wondering how that happens. Keep in mind one thing the game points out. The enemy may be sending their own attack your way, and the forward shot and bounce is a good way to end up running right into said attack. Things like that. To make up for this, the forward shot often has plenty of traits, providing reason to use it over the other two dash shots for the extra power and range. The weapon type dependent reasons such as better homing. Apparently not much on pin up. Well, there's the homing. Some homing, but not much. The forward shot even always has the earliest charge-up restart and the least committal time of any dash shot, unless you're using claws, where the forward shot has the most of the latter in the middle of the former, because the developers didn't want to over-centralize distance closure with those fast animals. Otherwise, the forward shot is solid for smiting passive targets, but we can bet that opposition won't make the forward shot's usage easy. Next up is the side shot. Depending on evasive power, the side shot tends to have the lowest power of any of the dash shots. 7.9. Here's the side shot. Assuming I don't miss it. 48.6. This isn't always the case, but it will generally hold true compared to forward shots, which I should mention release sooner than the side shots on any weapon family other than clubs, which, by the way, do not have the user bounce on dash shots. Speaking of the bouncing, side shots are intended for this purpose, trading out offense for defense by having a burst mobility option for evasion. One that has some reliability compared to parry dodging and dash arounds needing the context to work. With the advantage that the side shot manages strafing for consistent mid-range combat. This is something the forward shot is missing, but there's a fix for that involves skill. The spin shot technique, you saw that I dealt 58.9 damage there. Yeah, as expected with the forward shot. Yeah, I'll put a nice little info card for anybody wanting to see more about it, but I'm covering about its most obvious use here. I can showcase the appeal and everything by an early boss battle designed to teach about using the side shot. Now, here's the battle in question, in Chapter 4's boss, Great Reaper. Great Reaper has a particular attack where he shoots lasers out of his eyes, and they hit as soon as they appear. They call it hit scan, pretty much. And, yeah. He can actually use it whenever he wants, whether you're on the top floor or the bottom floor. Although it's easier to dodge when you're on the bottom floor, because you'll be closer to him. So natural encirclement will more easily confound the lasers. I'll be focusing on the top floor usage, where you're just dealing with other attacks that are easier to dodge. Great Reapers, which attack Great Reaper uses depends on which floor you're on, by the way. So, getting on to this battle. There's a jump pad here, and for reference, the Great Reaper will summon multiple repeat hits if he hits you with a laser. And yeah. Anyway, you can see that the side shot provides that burst mobility that is useful for dodging that laser. He telegraphs the attack by, what was it? By tilting his left head to the left while his sight is not glowing. Yeah, direct hit. First miss was not intentional. Second miss was intentional on top of that one. I'm trying to explain this stuff. And yeah, the repets that would be summoned if the Great Reaper hits you with its laser. They will hound you until you knock them out of play. But in the first place, we don't want to get hit by the laser. This is a little dull. Let's slice things. Spin shot. Over here, buddy. Ah, I missed. Well, I did damage him, but I wanted to hit sweet spot because of the way sweet spot mechanics work in this game. Again, I missed the sweet spot. Yeah. Oh, I got it. And that stunned him. But I'm deliberately not shooting him because I wanted to play about it, about the style of the spin shot. I mean, I could have ended this battle long ago, and this is on boss battles normal, by the way. But yeah, usually I have the telegraph take. The sight is not glowing when he's about to do it, and he tilts it to his right. Oh, and in case you're wondering, you can tell you've successfully done a given attack based on its animation, or your fire's animation, and in a versus mode. Oh, and just for reference, fighters actually have weaker stats than the That was a little early. I think I would have hit his head if I hit. I waited. Headshot again. That's the touchy thing about the spin shot. You do have to re-aim. Yeah, I didn't even have to see the sight not glowing there. I'm an idiot. I mean, I'd have this battle done many times over. Yeah, do the continued spinning clockwise, buddy. And done. Style! As you can see, the spin shot technique is a case of the game giving the player some style points. Whether or not the developer even caught on at some point when they were making the game can't be decisively proven from what I can tell. But I could say the same about Secret of Evermore for the SNES having the ability to have the dog sniff for nearby interesting objects be usable as a standby command to prevent him from wandering around. Which of course gave me material with the volcano slopes area in that game. The spin shot technique is still less likely to have been intentional from the start than what I had mentioned about Secret of Evermore, but it provides good gameplay all the same, since it also requires handling to use. I can particularly point out that Japanese players have a track record of motion sickness. So yeah, that would be an advantage for us Americans in a Japanese-owned game. At the same time, Mushironi did point out that risk assessment move usage as a requirement has the drawback of infighting elitism, regardless of skill requirements. Fortunately, the spin shot technique does balance itself out in that regard. Already, it doesn't make the user invincible. It's just to basically use Verity's analogy in the conversation about the armed weapon family. As the user in an SUV, one that actually requires mental energy to keep handled well when part of the advantage of it relies on better attack frequency. I mean, you saw you had some iffy handling about it at times. Movement reading and homing attacks do still exist after all. You parry dodging for Great Reaper's scythe sweeping after all. And for reference, parry dodging can be done against the eyelids, but the timing is strict enough to want the alternative that doesn't provide the intangibility time. Regardless, when all is said and done, the side shot itself already manages a case of automatic offense. One that just has to worry about more durability, so somebody who's even more of a squishy wizard myself does still have an out if they don't mind more lengthy gameplay that could cause boredom to kick in or cause them to take some painful read. Still, finally, we have the back shot with its unique strike. The back shot is kind of similar to the side shot in the involvement of using it for dodging, except where the side shot involves strafing, the back shot simply goes into moving away from the given enemy and or a given location figured to be dangerous enough. As long-range combat tends to be more polarizing than close-range combat, the developers are realizing to give the backshot some range shortcomings. And whether or not the backshot has more power and or better attack speed stats than the side shot, it's actually actively dependent on the weapon type and even the weapon family most of the time. Although you can still expect the backshot to have more committal time except than the forward shot, except again. On the cloth family. Consistently, the backshot comes out later than the side shot, with the exception of the cannon's back shots actually coming out earlier than any of the other shots, including the neutral shot. The cannons having that quirk comes back to the big point of backshots beyond simply seeking to escape the other guy. They are the most character-defining attack for each weapon type. While plenty that aren't simple shots, which the first blade does have, tend to be stationary or semi-stationary projectiles. Some, like Samurai Blade, Hyundai Club, and Predator Cannon, do have active mortar shots for their back shots. The spin shot technique is also useful for bolstering the stationary projectiles. Whether by blindness protection, strafing movement, or even achieving a dunk shot with a weapon like ball cannon. Another good thing about the spin shot technique, please don't remove it, Bandai Namco. I want my dunk shots. Bandai Namco, if you're worried about over-centralized skills, just consider things like subtle busted side attacks with such an easier utility with them. And generally keep in mind that emphasis on utility is how projectile warfare is best balanced to begin with. But anyway, yeah, backshots work off of character utility. So they do have their definite place in the game design. Next is continuous fire, or rapids as I call them, again for simplicity, and also because in-game files do back me up in that regard. But anyway, again, I will be covering the dash attacks. But anyway, the rapids are used in case of shots when you don't have enough charge up for the shot itself. In other words, when you don't have full charge up. Dash rapids tend to have any key differences, usually be subtle enough. Although some rapids on the same weapon type may be a bit distinct beyond power difference. Case in point, the Aurum Palm. Yeah, the Aurum Palm's side rapid has a spread shot effect, but its forward and back rapids don't. And there may be some other subtle differences depending on the weapon type. As a rule of thumb, back rapids have the most committal time, and forward rapids have the least. This is different on claws and clubs. I already explained why with claws. It's similar to what happens with our forward shots, really. Clubs, in their difficulty in putting foes in swinging range, have the least committal time on the back swings, and a tie between the forward and side swings, as far as committal time goes. I can at least cite that the rapids are designed for ranged DPS. The only problem is that the bullets are smaller. It's also more desirable to have a personal hit evade advantage, really, as a result of the smaller bullets. In addition to the rapids also having less shot cancel than their. And I should also mention that the rapids are less energetic with the parry charge-up mechanic. I can point out how the parry charge-up mechanic is built around charge attacks potentially being a power-up letdown, because when you parry, you do get intangibility time. So, more often than not, parry charge-up can expect to be a gambit on having good handling on the weapon type's character. With dash rapids, your DPS would have to cost safety. Now, if I'm not a glowing clue because I don't. Excuse me. Because I'm not getting intangibility time. You just be busy dancing around without it. And remember that being red or being sweet or some such is a thing. Even with the spin shot technique, it's bolstering the forward rapid with strafing movement. That's an interesting system, honestly, though. Considering the rapid are generally locked out when having full charge up, barring holding down. Barring holding down the fire button, because neutral rapid does get registered for buffing before neutral shot does. I may as well go into the neutral shot and neutral rapid at this point. Both require not pushing hard in a given direction, and both will in fact less of a punch. Even having less shot cancel than their dash counterparts, although there may be exceptions. Do note though, for example, that Royal Blade's forward shot is junk. So the neutral shot and rapid can be used for probing or simply chipping at the other guy while being ready to respond. Note that my reticle quickly turns back to green when I stop using the neutral rapid. And it doesn't take too long with the neutral shot either, so yeah.
Thank you.
That was a little faster than I'd like.
Thank you.
Hey, look! I can cancel the neutral shot with a power like reflex barrier. Not the most impressive thing when powers have limited charges. I'll grant as much. Neutral rapid though allows for canceling without a dash or melee attack. So I can demonstrate. Or sometimes both. I'll get into that, by the way. Yes, the canceling can be helpful at times. Now, I need to demonstrate something real quick about the neutral rapid in general.
Thank you.
Know my travel distance for the... Not how far I traveled when the reflex barrier was up. Now, no. Now I'm going to do it without neutral rapid this time. Quite a bit of a difference. I had traveled 26 meters thereabouts. Here I traveled about 32 because... Yeah, what happens is that the neutral rapid often slows down the user while in use. Although Cancer Claws will instead get a speed boost. An Aurum Blade, Hedgehog Claws, Ninja Palm, Compact Arm, and all those in clubs won't reduce the mobility while using the neutral rapid either. Still, this is a way to make sure inattentive players firing away with a neutral rapid would surely get caught more easily, because little is more frustrating than a target that has enough safety factor for any sort of free offense. Speaking of, easy long range is the daily concern for club users, in the midst of how these mighty pillars play differently enough that they need their own section. For starters, their dash shots do not give the player much momentum to begin with, and I missed there somehow. How do I miss with that? Although the slide shot usage does still dodge greatly precisely during 9.0, but the timing is, again, not too lenient, so don't try that at home, club kids. That aside, the poor burst mobility, well, it can be fixed with directional influence a little, is one of the more subtle differences, and when it already weakens the spin shot technique, so much that the club's shots I wind up providing it with ease is practically easy come, easy go. Yeah, that is saying something. There is naturally the lack of rapid fire options. They are replaced by these close range swings, which kind of need the club user to accomplish their general objective to have much usefulness. I will further cite how the dash swings operate differently, but in the entire 10 years that I have had Kid Icarus Uprising, I find all three of them to be situational, and I set a high bar for finding uses as a result, remaining one of the clubs and having pioneered grid reading in the process. Bandai Namco, if you're remaking Kid Icarus Uprising, I would welcome dash wings at least having reflecting projectiles as a show of learning from your mistakes with Lil Mac, considering people haven't liked his design issues. And besides which, clubs can be treated as baseball bets. Something about that sounds familiar. Anyway. Also, I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but the melee dash attack also doesn't result in continued momentum. What was it? which would be the continued momentum would be used to get behind the other guy, but although staying in front of them can still prevent escape if the topography is permitting. And let's not forget that clubs have the worst attack speed stats of any of the 9 weapon families, with little in the way of making us much objective. You can already see everything I have had to go through when making use of Skyscraper Club, contender for the least adept mobility of any weapon type in the game. Ancient Death can at least spin shot the effectiveness before anybody brings that up. There are, however, some strengths worth considering, and not just the heightened raw power with both melee attacks and the shots. And also the high stamina amount, even if mobility issues do mitigate in a bit. With standard clubs, the forward and side shots work off of high range at the cost of low velocity. So, when that same low velocity can allow for utility features such as counteracting strafing efforts. While the backshot can most likely be used as a blocker, like so. A quick bounce blocker, although you might be a little desperate to use it. Still. Meanwhile, the neutral shot can still land an abrupt hit that would be especially useful to disrupt dodge timing. I mean, it's relative, but still. Or especially call out escape attempts. And also helping is that it has an innate flip shot. As you can see, that shot didn't disappear when I shot it through the ground. Keep in mind that the slip shot property is not, for the neutral shot, is not on Atlas or Magnus Club. Although Magnus Club has clearly more mobility than range, guaranteeing that Magnus Club could probably just move around any relevant defilade anyway. In addition to upward swings, since they are still melee attacks, do not reset the Chargeup. Yeah, case in point. And with no rapids to worry about, the drawback for Chargeup lies rather in opportunity cost. Note how far I travel during the reflex area. Moving up. That was what? 35 meters?
Please entertain us.
Here I travel 30 meters. Yeah. Case in point about the better walking speed. Again, there's an exception to this rule. Capricorn Club does not get the speed boost at all, resulting in a mobility edge case for Skyscraper Club, for what it's worth. Often having Chargeup is still preferable to the extra walking speed, even if the extra walking speed would save on stamina, which can sometimes, even with the high stamina. Or even the swings quickly defeating enemy projectiles they managed to hit. And this is especially helped by how the parry charge ratio is higher for the club family, which generally has the longest charge-up times to worry about, Magnus and Capricorn clubs notwithstanding, of course. So the same ratio would already be adding effectiveness in the parry charge-up. Never mind that the ratio is higher. So, as we can survive, clubs, usually the hunted, have ways to become the hunter. And yes, in Japan, David is the one with raw power and Goliath is the one with speed. Honestly, we need more cases of Star Defense 6's Christmas busty in our media. Oh, and quick warning that's practically a footnote for the intent of this video. The swinging does in fact reset Chargeup in air battles, Yeah, note how long I took although we have full charge up, the reset doesn't happen. But still, reset charge up happening off of a melee attack is obnoxious, believe me. The swinging does, however, reflect projectiles in air battles. So, which does have me wondering why we can have both good trades in both in air and on ground. Whatever. Bandai Namco, please address that. Time to cover about melee attacks themselves. There aren't too many of them, actually. Outside the club swings, there's the melee combo and the melee dash attack. Considering Kid Icarus Uprising as a shooter, it would be more centralized around ranged combat, so my anxiety with long-range combat being needlessly powerful tends to more involve melee combat standing out less in unique roles than welcome, than the melee combat being any sort of joke outside the shooter context. Though I will say that Mercury's team's take on the Metroid series, Metroid Samus Returns and Metroid Dread, do basically vindicate my points via their melee counter, right down to the melee counter providing supply-based reward for landing it, and I've become glad for that. Still, here in Kid Icarus Uprising, the melee attacks are at least functional, even if there's significant bias in favor of claws and arms with their overall usage, rather than giving clubs sufficing to for overcoming their mobility and effective range issues, and the rest of the weapon family's better reward for things like genuine bravery. I need to point out that melee always involves the risk of the guy pulling it being right there to face with the opponent's own heaviest hit, which again calls to attention the SUV analogy by Verdi. Anti-armor consistently exists, and it's more than enough reason why fires and Power Thief, both already requiring their own close-range combat to see much of any use, having full line costs on the power grid. The melee combat would need points of satisfaction to improve viable character options. The melee dash attack, used while dashing while a melee attack is valid, which happens when right next to a target, is guaranteed to be the go-to option for pure DPS, with often less committal time than the dash shots before taking involved hit lag. While still hitting us hard, it can also be done without having to be close to target by pressing in the opposite running direction and then immediately afterwards pressing the attack button. Do keep in mind that this method has a cooldown. Do not ask me why Project Sora didn't simply give melee its own button to avoid the context complications and then have every use of the melee dash attack eat through stamina to prevent spamming it for mobility inflation. This being a melee attack, the melee dash attack, it doesn't reset charge up, of course. So the shots simply provide a bit of last second burst effectiveness that would give the other guy compromise. This is on top of the melee dash attack also moving right past the ball to compound them. And then further, assuming the user is not using a club, as I had mentioned. All of this does, of course, rely on the melee dash attack, which does bring up the melee melee combo, and believe me, surprisingly better design. The melee combo, done by inputting for melee attacking while not running, involves hitting the other guy with multiple successive strikes. The standard amount is actually 3, with claws instead having 5 in total, and clubs having 2. It's usually not as good at DPS with at the melee dash attack because the committal time from the hits does add up, and the final hit is significantly more committal than the rest, as what is intended to be a finishing blow. Case in point. Where was I? However, However, if you have a sense of finesse going on, the melee combo is flexible since you can abort on a given hit number in case you miss your target. Particularly useful for clubs if you realize what happens fast enough to avoid throwing out the second hit before it misses and leaves you about 7/10 of a second, even more susceptible to counterattack. Also worth noting is that the melee combo, when successful, is capable of a bit of burst damage. See, I did 80 there. Dash attack deals 70. So it can reward proper positioning when up close, which is helped by a bit of homing movement done on input, but usually nothing too insane. Just be mindful if the other guy has an armor power or some such active, because they'll be able to keep acting however they want, with only hit, stun, or already fatal damage slowing them down at all. And thus they can do anything up to and including deliberately taking hits to catch you in a habit. I'm sure you remember what happened with this character from Dragon Ball Super named Obani, who, to punctuate my point, was a non-reject, non-sated, non-idiot, who would undoubtedly opted to be a cavalry who would pick off mages. Sticking case in point with courtesy of one Son Gohan. Like I say, just get creative, folks. What I really want to bring up with the melee combo is that it actively involves a mechanic called melee clashing. Melee clashing is the result of two melee attacks hitting into each other, momentarily stunning both combatants and preventing either of them from directly taking damage or knockback from the attacks. I don't know the exact math involved in melee clashing, only that its end result is big mighty club hits and are subject to what I just explained against the iron power of ever so elfin claw swipes. Don't worry, I'm actually not snoring too much. This in fact actually means that club users do have to consider rock, paper, scissors, triangle more in close range combat itself, which simply leads to them making the club's power instead of having the club's power define them. With that in mind, the melee combo of the heavy infantryman can disrupt the melee attack and then tear the melee dash attack apart at that point, because the melee dash attack still has higher cooldown than the melee combo hit. It's not a melee dash attack. I have a higher cooldown than the melee combo hit. The melee dash attack works as cavalry and can snipe off somebody using shots, which don't melee clash to begin with. Oh, but here's the important part. That really helps Cloth. The shots, ever so obvious artillery, can disrupt the melee combo by bypassing the melee clashing. It's a surprisingly good melee combat system, even with the iffy number of move types that needs to be less lost to everybody milking weapon modifiers. With all of the attack types covered, there's one more subject to go over: Getup options. Now, in the practice range, I have only Angelic Missile as a way to display Getup options, and Angelic Missile innately prevents the Ukemi no matter how good your timing is. You might notice that I have the knockback recovery on this weapon, and knockback recovery would auto-trigger the Ukemi without needing to time your button press, but obviously that didn't happen here. But anyway, if you're wondering, the Ukemi works as it does in Super Smash Bros., except with actual mercy invincibility providing a reward for timing, instead of being killed so helplessly. Although it's at the cost of being unable to do an Ukemi roll in this game. Palutena knows that's a missed opportunity regardless. But I am getting into why Getup options still work so much better in Kid Icarus Uprising than they do in Super Smash Bros. Now, when you're in the knockdown state, you can either roll, attack, or do a standing Getup. Repeatedly pressing the aim button, or really any button.
Not done yet.
As I was saying, repeatedly pressing the aim button, which is likely the touchscreen, or really anything relating to the controlling the reticle or the camera, Mm. That will result in doing the standing getup, which is the getup done by default after a time frame that can feel a little short at times.
Still kicking.
But it does provide a higher mercy invincibility with minimized wait time for doing a follow-up.
Not done yet.
Dang it. I want to make it my point.
Not done yet.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, there we go. In addition to that benefits I mentioned, if you have a buff power like super armor or tirelessness and buffered, it will activate when you start doing the standing getup, which also applies with the UKME from what my notes imply. Move in and results in the roll done in the inputted direction. Diagonally. Apparently not. Well, you can still move in multiple directions, and the burst mobility from rolling is good enough. But anyway, you do the roll in the inputted direction, and Kid Icarus Uprising isn't in a 2.5 dimensional plane, so it's more versatile here regardless. In addition to having better and actually solid burst mobility. And yeah, again, a buffered buff power activates at the start of the roll. And attack results in... Attack is obviously done by the fire button. It has the highest committal time. Yeah, look at that. Yeah, the attack and get up at the highest committal time, resulting in a vulnerability power. And yeah. And yeah, a buffered buff power only activates when the attack getup finishes. But as you were able to see, it throws out a forward shot. Something that, while it isn't an exception to using and resetting the Chargeup, is still aimable and still miles better than some clumsy sweep attempt that doesn't even try to anti-air. So yeah, long story short, the Getups are better in Kid Icarus Uprising at their unique task for variable reasons. What keeps them from making gameplay disjointed? Yeah, you might know that was a little committal. As you may know that the Getups have more committal time than they did in Super Smash Bros. Well, any surplus intangibility also merely floors the amount in a follow-up.
Not done yet. Not done yet.
Yeah, like so. So reading the getup options becomes more efficient in return, and it gets to the point where clubs can actually chase, particularly benefiting, with the only foible they have to worry about from this, that they become more susceptible to being caught by heavier hits themselves when being chased themselves, having innate counterplay in its own right. Any issues with the surplus intangibility from getups are mitigated by one important factor.
Still kicking.
Yeah. The attacker still has more options, including casting powers such as Meteor Shower. Meanwhile, getup options can't chain into each other at all. for free at all, as can be inferred by how I even indicate needing a minimum 7 base power to force myself into the knockdown phase. Yeah. And this is in a practice mode, remember, so infinite intangibility is basically stopped. Basically. Evasion plus. Now, I could go into the power system, but there's a nice little 10,000 word blog post of mine with the bulk of as much talking about my standard skyscraper club power setup alone, and it even missed the analogy about going into the arena because I hadn't come up with as much at the time of writing it out. If I do cover about powers, it will be in a different video. Besides, I'm just covering about risk assessment in the core gameplay as a result of the stop and pop style. The combat system can be surprisingly robust when it doesn't get buried by exploitations, mind you. There's a good number of options for attacks, and they do have their strengths and weaknesses. The Parry Chargeup system can work for or against the dodging player depending on what they want to make use of, and generally encourages roleplay as a result. Even the melee system, while along with clubs having its moments of showing itself incomplete, it does manage to work as a teaching tool to keep melee management satisfying. At the end of the day, Kid Icarus Uprising's combat system, while having both some definite execution problems and also having a few problems with how it aggravates the control issues, is still a worthwhile case study.